This is The Matter at Hand, a wide range of discussion of contemporary issues and topics. Here's your host for today's program, Don Casteline.
Well, thank you so much for starting off your week here with WGRC's The Matter at Hand. A real delight to be along with you, and I'm really looking forward to the time here today. We're going to be chatting with Neil Anderson in the second half hour, talking about the bondage breaker, the next step. Moving through irrational fears, anxiety, abuse, disorders, and so forth. We'll be chatting about a number of different issues with Neil Anderson in the second half of today's program. Well, this half hour, what a wonderful subject as we chat with Penny Manetti, who is joining us from the Missouri region, not too far from Kansas City, author, along with her husband, of the book Called to Serve, Encouragement, Support, and Inspiration for Military Families. And Penny's husband is Lieutenant Colonel Tony Manetti, and he is a combat veteran command pilot. He is currently serving our nation. And first of all, Penny, let me just say a hearty welcome to the program, but also a real thank you to your husband for his service to our country, and really collectively as a family, because that is indeed the case, the way that it works.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Talk about what that is like as a family with a loved one who is in the military. It's a very personal thing, and it's a huge commitment. Many families here through this central part of Pennsylvania understand what that means and have been impacted in the same kind of a way. For those that maybe don't have a direct connection with someone who's actively serving, just give us an idea of how much that changes life.
Well, being in the military is it's an honor, first of all, because as a spouse, we get to serve our country by supporting our spouses that are serving. But what that looks like is basically a lot of moving. It can tell you in we've moved 14 times in 23 years, and we're by no means out of the ordinary. There's people that move a lot more than us, but it's a great opportunity to serve our country, to get to know other cultures. We have just a wonderful opportunity to support America through our military.
Talk about just some of the logistics that go along with moving that much, because for many, moving is such a thing where you get anxious over it. There's so much upheaval, and I know you have children as well, which always adds to that whole process of moving and just maybe even making it a more involved process. Did you find that as a couple you kind of wrestled with that a little bit, maybe fears or anxiety when it comes to not just the aspect of having a loved one in the military and some of the risks that go along with that, but also the nature of moving around the country and so forth?
Well, I tell you, there's always anxiety with moving, especially many times in the military. You don't know until possibly a month before you're moving where you're going. And that always makes it really challenging for putting kids into new schools and new situations and finding the homes. So there's always that challenge. But I can tell you one thing that a neighbor, a dear friend of mine, told me as we were tearfully saying goodbye from her driveway. We were stationed in Wichita, Kansas at the time, and we were getting ready to move. The moving van had just left. And as we were saying our goodbye, she said, there are hearts out there that are just waiting for you to touch them. And when she said those words to me, I realized that God prepares us wherever we are to go. And He has always provided friends. He's provided good schools for our kids. There's been challenges, but through every challenge, it's been a growing opportunity for our family. So just as I say in the verse in Deuteronomy, that the Lord goes out before you and prepares the way. And He has in our family many times over.
Our guest is Peggy Manetti, and she is a co-author along with her husband of the book Called to Serve, Encouragement, Support, and Inspiration for Military Families. We'll take a quick time out here. We'll come back with more of the conversation next on The Matter at Hand.
Find out what you've been missing on The Matter at Hand on WGRC.
Great to have you along with us today on The Matter at Hand. Don Casteline in on this Monday, and joining us is Peggy Monetti, and co-author of the book Called to Serve, Encouragement, Support, and Inspiration for Military Families. And you can find out more about this book at area Christian bookstores. Also, she and her husband really helping others. There's a ministry that they have, which is called Called to Serve. And I want you just to talk a little bit, Peggy, about some of the Penny. I'm sorry, the logistics of serving in the military and just some of the difficulties that come along with that. So often, maybe we think about praying for active folks who may be overseas, and certainly that's appropriate to do. But when people come back from the military to their families, so often they bring such difficult circumstances. Post-traumatic stress disorder would be one example of something that we hear about often. Tell us about some of those things that you know many are struggling with when they come back from actively serving.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because currently we have 30% of our warriors coming back displaying signs of and symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And, you know, when a spouse waves goodbye to her husband, and when he comes back, she's so incredibly grateful and happy that he's come back safely. But then there's this whole array of different issues that come up with the post-traumatic stress disorder. And so that is one aspect that we go into deeply into our book, because it's not only, we take the contentious issues that affect our military, not only from a warrior's point of view, but also from the spouse's point of view. So spouses can get support for compassion fatigue, because this is one thing that they end up experiencing due to the conditions that their spouses are going through. But we not only give them the resources in the book, but we also have a website that people can tune into. It's called toserveministry.com, where we have over 14 pages of incredible supportive resources for our military and for their spouses that they can go to for answers to some of these tough questions. But when you talk about getting back into the family arena after a spouse is deployed, and this can be an incredible challenge, because when a warrior comes home and there's great celebration and the kids have made posters that, you know, line the driveway and the homecoming cake is finally polished off, there's a transition phase that we call the honeymoon phase ends. And that reintegration of where the spouse has to fit into the family. One of our warriors had a great saying. He says, "You just don't add dad and stir. You have to sit back, and when the spouse has been at the command for the last 6 months or a year, taking care of finances, taking care of all of those things that her husband, or in the case of a female warrior overseas, her husband's been taking care of, and then they get back and they have to give up that seat to their spouse. It's a big transition phase. And so we go through a lot of the communication challenges and how to get back into the life triumphantly and easily. So that's one great aspect that we like to address in our book, and it's very helpful for our spouses.
And I know with that added strain that you're telling us about right there, I know that you've seen statistics which just show just how many marriages actually crumble and fall apart under that kind of strain and stress that you're mentioning. Yes,
that's true, and unfortunately, it's really skyrocketing, especially with our warriors that are going over now for their third, fourth, and now some of them their fifth tours to Iraq and Afghanistan. So with that deployment, we address how to keep intimacy alive while you're deployed. This is not something that normal, Americans really look at, because it's not something that you really deal with on a daily thing. But for our military families, this is becoming the norm of keeping their marriages together and while they are apart for such a long time.
Now, your husband is currently the director of operations of the 13th Bomb Squadron at Whiteman Air Force Base there in Missouri. And how long has he been in the military? You mentioned those 14 moves. How many years have you been a military family like that?
It has been just a little bit over 23 years now. So, yes.
Yeah.
We've been in fact, he's mission planning now for a flight tomorrow, so that's why he couldn't be here with us.
Well, certainly do pass along, again, our thanks to him for his service to our country, and perhaps another time down the road we'll be able to connect with him. We'd love to do that. For those difficult transitions, because how many of those 23 years was he actually away overseas where you didn't get a chance to interact as much?
Well, there were several times. There's been at least 3-4 times that it's been a long duration during that time. But there's always deployments. There's always training missions where they're taken away for a couple weeks to a few months at a time. So, and you never know. That's the thing with the military, that an exercise can just pop up, or something in the world, just within these last few months. Things that, my husband will say, I can't let you know what's going on, but just watch the news, So this is how I find out. But, a lot of trust in the Lord comes into play.